he gave, and people love to quote all those different things, and that's great. But my problem is when we have these events, we use those quotes, but for some reason, we don't bring up the policies. And I'm a little tired, not because I went to bed at 5 o'clock in the morning and woke up at 9:01, not because I got to leave here on a 2:35 flight. I got to be live on my show tonight at 6 p.m. I'm tired because when we talk about this holiday, we have to understand that this holiday was not and is not about Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. In 1964, when he won the Nobel Peace Prize, he accepted it on behalf of the movement. It wasn't him. It was the other organizations, it was the other leaders, it was the people out there who were doing the work, it was the unnamed individuals, the ordinary people who were doing extraordinary things. It was the folks who were showing up at protests, putting their lives on the line, those who are black and those who are white, those who are male and those who are female. That's who he won. He accepted the Nobel Peace Prize. And when the holiday was created, when the monument was put up and led by alphas in Washington, D.C., it was a monument not to him, well, it's just fact, it's fact. The monument started in the living room of two alphas in Maryland, and let's just be real clear who started it, who funded it, who made it happen. That's just called facts. This ain't Kellyanne Conway alternative facts. But we have to understand that monument and the holiday is about the people who did the work. And every year we seem to forget that because we deify one individual. And the reason I'm tired, because I'm sick and tired of America and Tennessee and Knoxville and all these different cities operating in terms of this individual as if he is a civil rights bobblehead who was nice and wonderful and prayed for everybody and wanted everybody to get along and wanted kids to hold hands. But that is not the reality of who he was. He was a radical figure who was willing to challenge this country, whether they were Republican or Democrat, conservative or liberal, black or white, male or female, and who was willing to put his life on the line along with the others like Diane Nash and Septima Clark and John Lewis and Jim Lawson and of course so many others, Hosea Williams, Andrew Young, Reverend Jackson, Reverend Fred Shuttlesworth. We can talk about all of these individuals. Constance Baker Motley. We can talk about Ella Baker. We can go on and on and on and name these people because they were willing to challenge this nation, as King said, to be true to what you put on paper. And so when we have these events, folk come out and they buy tickets. They take selfies. They post them on social media. Because if we want to be real honest, MLK events are what I call annual Negro checkoff events. Now, let me be real clear. If some of y'all wanted a nice, feel-good speech, y'all should have invited my wife. She's a reverend. She could have prayed with you. She could have laid hands on you. She could have made you feel wonderful because God has given her this wonderful spirit of comfort. He ain't give me that. If you watched me on television, heard me on radio, y'all know God gave me a spirit of discomfort. And see, the reality is the reason discomfort is important is because discomfort forces you to get out of your comfortable position. Discomfort forces you to say, man, this seat not fitting right. It's not right, which means you're supposed to get out of that seat and begin to move and do something. It's right there on the front of your program where it says action. But so many of us get so comfortable, and so we come to these programs to feel good and recite quotes, but we don't want to deal with the policies that he was advocating. You cannot come to an MLK event and praise him and talk about his life and legacy, and you do not bring up poor people. You cannot. He was murdered planning the Poor People's Campaign. Not for black folks, but for poor white people and poor black people. And when you have broke white people in Tennessee who can't stand Obamacare, but they'll say, don't get rid of the Affordable Care Act, and you go, you know it's the same thing. When you have 20 states in this country right now denying food benefits for children in the summer, when you have politicians in this country who wear MAGA hats, who decline Medicaid expansion, and they call themselves pro-life, you cannot be pro-life and deny health care to America's people. Oh, I know, I told you I was going to get a little uncomfortable. And I see some folks like, man, I ain't trying to clap on that, but you cannot say you're pro-life if you're against feeding people. You can't say you're pro-life if you're against educating people. If you're going to be pro-life from the womb to the tomb. Don't tell me you are pro-life in this room, in this city, in this state, in this country, if you say nothing when unarmed black people are shot and killed by cops. Don't tell me you're pro-life if you say nothing when brothers are incarcerated for crimes they did not commit and are serving 30 and 40 years in prison. You just had a brother in North Carolina who was awarded $25 million who served 44 years in prison for a crime he did not commit for raping a white woman, and they found 40 other fingerprints at the scene, and that brother today is 68 years old, lost 44 years of his life. Last month, Craig Watkins was found dead in Dallas, 56 years old, but he was the first black district attorney in the state of Texas, and he created the first integrity unit of any DA's office to go back and double check cases to ensure people who were convicted were properly convicted. And numerous folks were let out of prison because of erroneous prosecutions. That is what Dr. King will be talking about if he was here in 2024. See, it's cute reciting quotes. It's cute talking about the I Have a Dream speech when actually the actual title of that speech was called Normalcy No More. It's cute people saying, oh, I love the I Have a Dream portion, but if you are hyped about the I Have a Dream portion of his speech, that's like being hyped with the hoop part of the sermon, and you can't even recount the scripture the pastor recited. Some of y'all in the room trying to figure out what the hell is the hoop part of the sermon. So ask the same black person, what? Show of hands, who know what the hoop part of the sermon is? 2/3 of this room like, I have no idea what a hoop is. Why am I going through all of this? Yeah, H-O-O-P. It's the hoop part. Some spell it W-H-O-O-P. The W is silent. Why am I walking through all of this? It is because you cannot divorce the person from the policies. You cannot divorce King and his followers from the actions. 3 of the most critical civil rights bills were passed in a span of 13 years, very similar to that period after the Civil War, where the 13th and 14th and 15th Amendment were passed, called the Reconstruction Amendments. When you talk about the Voting Rights Act, the Civil Rights Act, and the Fair Housing Act, you have to understand the reality of where this nation was and where this nation is. Even though the Fair Housing Act was passed in 1968, the black home ownership rate today in 2024 is lower than what it was when the Fair Housing Act was passed in 1968. So again, we can't talk about King and we don't talk about housing, because that was one of the issues that was advocated. In fact, when he was assassinated on April 4th, LBJ the next day sent a letter to the House and said, honor the life and legacy of King and end the filibuster against the housing bill, and it was signed into law 9 days later. And let me be real clear, because people get real confused by this. I love hearing Republicans talk about the percentage who voted for this and for that. Y'all, the Fair Housing Act was filibustered for 2 years in the United States Senate because Democrats and Republicans in the North and the South were like, listen, they can go to lunch counters, they can ride buses, they can stay in hotels, but we ain't trying to have them live up next door to each other. And that sentiment still exists today. You still have black houses today where African Americans' homes are devalued at a lower rate than somebody white. When you have appraisers go into the homes of black people, see photos and see art, and lower the value of their house. And when you lower the value of a house, you are also impacting now generational wealth, because they then can't resell the home at a certain price and now pass that money on to their kids. And so I was on this conservative podcast, Patrick Bet David, and we went back and forth, and he told me systemic racism wasn't a reality. And I said, you done lost your mind. And then when I brought up the actual data of census tracts showing the appraisal numbers, he said, well, I don't believe it. I said, well, it's amazing how you only believe research that you bring up, but you don't want to believe the research I'm bringing up. All these things are still here, which says to us that if you really, really, truly love Dr. King and you want to come to this program, the question is, if you are an elected official sitting in this room, I challenge you to say, what are you doing about the housing crisis that is happening in America right now? See, I need you to understand something. Listen, my mama had 7 brothers and sisters, 39 grandchildren, some 70 plus great-grandchildren, some 120 plus great-great. I grew up, never spent a night at a friend's house. We had enough family members. And so let me be real clear. I don't need new friends. So the reason I do what I do and say what I say, and the reason I speak truth the way I do, is because I don't have to make other folk comfortable and feel good. Somebody has to say what needs to be said and make folk uncomfortable and challenge them in a way the way they're supposed to. And the reality is that when we look at where this country is headed, when we look at how is it in 2024, in this country, and especially in this state, that we're still having debates and discussions and fights about the right to vote. That's right. You cannot stand here and talk about being a patriot and being an American if you are standing in the way of people being able to exercise the fundamental right to vote. You cannot say to me in this country and in this state and in this city that you love your guns, which is the Second Amendment, but you skip the First Amendment. When you have black state legislators who are sent there by their constituents to represent them, and they are expelled from the state house, and then there are folks who are silent when that happens. I don't care if they're in the same party. I don't care if they're your friends. You cannot be silent when individuals who are elected by the people are shut down because they have the audacity to speak against the policies that you are supporting. See, again, I told y'all, I got friends. I'm good. And see, I know this is ticking some folk off because, again, you want them to say, well, man, can't we just talk about what King said? Can we all get along? Okay, let's go ahead and go there. Since some folk love the I Have a Dream speech, that's fine. Why don't you go to the top of the speech? When the king said America gave black folks a check stamp insufficient funds, that's economics. Did I not mention economics? Did I not mention black folks being shot and killed by cops unarmed? In the exact same speech, King talked about police brutality. Same speech. In the same speech, he talked about voting rights. So everything I've talked about, he literally mentioned on August 28, 1963. Oh, but I know the problem is we got caught up in the who part, which is the I have a dream part. Can we all get along? Can kids hold hands together? Because here's the whole deal. Because I hate this question every year. And I was on CNN, they would ask it, is the dream still alive? I couldn't stand that dumbass question. Why? Because you can't get to the dream unless you deal with the nightmare. You cannot be a married couple and y'all having problems and you want to focus on the joy, but you don't want to deal with the pain. That's right. You can't just sit here and say, oh man, I would love to make an A in this class. You can't do that unless you study. And the fundamental problem with Americans, white and black, is that we don't want to confront the hard stuff, the difficult stuff. We want everything to be wonderful and joyful and nice and comfortable, where we all everything is just great and we get along. You can't enjoy that until you deal with the hard stuff. Yeah. And the hard stuff, and looking at the data, the numbers do not lie. And yet we're walking around so comfortable and everything is great. No, it's not. No, it's not, because somebody has to be willing to say what is necessary and challenge conventional wisdom. You are dealing right now in a country where folk are mad about DEI when half of them can't spell DEI. And now all of a sudden they're claiming, oh, well, folks they're getting jobs and they unqualified. Hey, let me help y'all out with something. Have y'all ever noticed any time in America the qualified is brought up, it is only brought up when we're talking about somebody black or who's a minority? Oh, I'm serious. I was talking to somebody, they said, yes, Roland, we'd love to have some qualified applicants. I went, first of all, I assume your ass wants some qualified applicants. Like I don't need you to use the qualified with me. I would assume that. But that's literally where we are. And then when you look at leadership, I mean, look, numbers don't lie. How many black Fortune 500 CEOs? How many African Americans in the C-suites? How many African Americans who are board of directors? When you have in venture capital right now, less than 2% of all venture capital funds are invested in black and minority institutions. Now, let me help y'all out, because see, some of y'all don't even realize this. If you are a public worker, meaning you, school teacher, police officer, firefighter, work for the city, county, state, school board, federal government, stand up. You're a public worker, stand up. If you're retired or you still work, you're public. Stand up. Stay standing, stand up. I don't know why some of y'all hesitate. Y'all know if y'all work for the public, stop. I'm like, oh. Stay standing. Some of y'all with this, y'all stand up too. Y'all included. If you're a public worker, let me help y'all out. Stay standing. I want you to look around at each other. I now want you to understand that you are looking at the greatest collection of wealth in America. Let me say that again. Pension funds represent the greatest collection of wealth in America. When private equity is looking to go get money to invest, they're going to pension funds. Texas, California, Tennessee, New York, New Jersey, all of this. And here's what's interesting. It's your money. Venture capital is getting your money. And so when we're complaining about how venture capital is not actually funding diverse businesses, they're actually using your money and your money. So if we actually want to change how private equity and venture capital is investing in America, y'all have got to speak up to say, you using my money. Y'all can now take a seat. Now you begin to understand this reality in terms of Wall Street is completely funded by pension funds. That's your money. And so when we're talking about who are the accounting firms, the law firms, who is now doing, you literally have an entire ecosystem that is freezing African Americans and people of color out of this whole deal. Some of y'all are asking, some of my conservative folks in the room, I love this here when people talk about, well, I don't understand why African Americans look to government. Do y'all realize when I was at the Treasury Department when they were renaming, they were putting a plaque on one of the buildings representing the Freedman Bank, I met a brother who was the first black person to work for a bank in the state of Louisiana. I met him. Now I want you to think about that. Because this is the problem that we don't really want to confront. We talk about freedom in this country. I was born November 14, 1968. King was assassinated April 4th, 1968. Nixon gets elected in November 1968, comes in 1969. Arthur Fletcher takes what LBJ said, puts it in place affirmative action, then all of a sudden, affirmative action is created. Civil Rights Act, Voting Rights Act, Fair Housing Act. The reality is that my nieces and nephews are the first generation of Martins born technically fully free. I want you to think about that. I was not born fully free in November 14th, 1968. When I'm talking about the money, what I'm breaking down is the structures of this country. This is what King was dealing with, not just when I had a during speech, but the last 5 years of his life. Coretta Scott King said, they killed my Martin when he started talking about the money. America, including black people, said Dr. King, look, what you know about this war stuff? Just go, why don't you just stick to that civil rights stuff? Until he spoke at Riverside Church on April 4th, 1967. And I don't care what anybody says, there is no coincidence that on April 4th, 1967, he gives a speech denouncing the Vietnam War, denouncing militarism, denouncing racism, denouncing poverty, and he specifically said that the war in Vietnam was going to take the resources away from the war on poverty, and that's why he opposed it. There is no coincidence that he is killed to the day 1 year later, because he was talking about the money. And see, if you are not having a money conversation, you ain't having an American conversation. You don't believe me? Fine. How many of y'all been to D.C.? How many of y'all been to the White House or walked by the White House, drove by the White House? There's only one federal agency that shares along with the White House. Treasury. Building over here is Treasury. Building over here is the White House. Power, money. Money, power. That's why there's a revolving door of Wall Street folk coming through Treasury, because that's where all the money is. In fact, I've been to both buildings. The Treasury building is actually a more ornate building than the White House is. The Treasury Department truly makes the White House look like public housing. Because that's where the money is. And I'm saying all of this is because if you want to talk about any fundamental issue that is inflicting African Americans and people of color, it has a direct correlation and a direct tie back to the money. And so the attacks on DEI, the attacks on affirmative action are about keeping the next generation from accessing the money. My book is called White Fear, How the Browning of America is Making White Folks Lose Their Minds. And it's in the data. There were people who were polled after Obama was elected, and they literally said, oh my God, we're scared to death that he's just going to give everything to black people. I love when people talk about welfare, and they automatically assume black, when the reality is welfare was created for white women in this country. I love to watch white men talk about how they can't stand affirmative action and white women when the greatest beneficiary of affirmative action in American history has been white women. Okay, so some of y'all look at me like y'all confused. Some of y'all looking at me like, so let me just go ahead and teach just a little bit. How many of y'all ever heard of Title IX? Heard of Title IX? A lot of y'all think Title IX is about sports, huh? No, it's not. Title IX was passed in order to open the professional schools and colleges to women. Where's Title IX come from? Thought so. Title IX is a provision of the 1964 Civil Rights Act. So if you are a woman, if you are a doctor, a lawyer, or an engineer, and you went to professional school, you should be thanking black folks, because without the 1964 Civil Rights Act, you don't have a Title IX that created the opportunity for women to become professionals. At that point in America, most women only could be teachers. And all of a sudden, because the Title IX professional schools that were getting research dollars had to open their doors, and that's what happened. Those are facts. If you are sitting here, Japanese or Korean or Latino, and you're voting in your native language, you should be thanking black people, because that's a provision of the 1965 Voting Rights Act. The numbers don't lie. If you are gay and you are appreciative of same-sex marriage, y'all should be thanking black people, because that's the 14th Amendment, one of the Reconstruction Amendments, the Equal Protection Clause that was created. So when you look at when you look at every civil rights bill, matter of fact, if you are disabled in this country and you are thankful for the 1996 American with Disabilities Act, you better thank black people, because that is a provision of the 1964 Civil Rights Act. What I'm laying out to you is that every civil right that has come to folk in this country has been a result of black blood being spilled in this nation. It's undeniable. And if you want to fact check me, go right ahead, because everything I'm telling you is fundamentally true. What we have to deal with now is that if we truly want to praise Dr. King and recognize Dr. King, then frankly, you got to change what you're doing. You got to stop coming to these luncheons, enjoying an okay dinner and an okay piece of cake and some. You got to stop doing that and say, what am I going to do when I leave this luncheon to change the condition of my city and my state if it's in line with Dr. King? In fact, this luncheon should be your personal state of the person address. You should come back here next year and say, what did I commit myself to do in the last 364 days to change what's going on, if I truly say I love and appreciate Dr. King and what he stood for and what the others stood for? How am I willing to be a change agent? How am I willing to counter where we are? You cannot celebrate this nation spending nearly $900 billion on the military, and when you had a deficit battle, a debt battle, you had Republicans who were trying to cut 80% of the food benefits going to women and children. You cannot say you love King if you support $900 billion for weapons and you oppose money going to children and women for food. That is not who he was. We have to go back to the radical Dr. King, who was willing to confront this country, willing to confront power, whether they were mayors or county commissioners or state reps or state senators or speakers of the House or Senate president or governors or presidents. Even if they look like you, even if you're in the same party, you cannot tell me that you love and revere Dr. King, but you want to ignore what that man stood for and what that man fought for. Now it's not the time for this generation to be silent, to be still, and to sit in your comfortable places. Now is the time for every single person in this room to use your power, whether you are a CEO or whether you're an executive, to say, how do we change how we look? How do we change who we employ? How do we change how we connect with the community? Do not just come to black communities with your philanthropy. You need to come with jobs and investment. Do not just come with cute speeches, but you should be coming talking real policy. And this city, a year from now, should look different than it looks today if you're willing to commit yourself to it. Because I need you to understand, there are more people sitting in this room right now, the number of people who were sitting in a church basement in Montgomery in 1956. And it was a handful of black people sitting in a church basement in Montgomery that changed Montgomery, a 382-day boycott that was not supposed to be more than 1 day. Then it was 5 days, and then they said, let's stop going. And after Montgomery, they then said, what's next? And then it was Albany, and then it was Selma, and then it was Birmingham. To this day, there are people who are celebrating, who are focusing on the movement that this country created, a 13-year movement, and they are utilizing what took place here. Poland, in the stockyards, Lech Walesa, they were singing, lift every voice and sing. They were singing, we shall overcome. In Russia, in Ukraine, in other countries, when they had the Arab Spring, they were wearing signs saying, I am a man. The same signs that Memphis sanitation workers were wearing in 1968. And so if the Arabs, if the folks in Poland and other countries can have an appreciation and study the movement and lead to rights, then you tell me why the folks sitting in this room cannot do it. Because you got to have the intestinal fortitude and the consciousness, and you got to actually give a damn about somebody other than yourself. And let me be clear to everybody in this room who is not black. You need to be a modern day James Reed. You need to be a modern day Cheney, Goodman, and Schwerner. You need to be a modern day Viola Uzo, a white woman who was a mother from Michigan, who was watching TV, who went down to Selma, and was helping folks register to vote. And when she was driving back from Montgomery after King's speech, her head was blown off by some racist KKK driving by in a truck. But that woman was willing to give her life because she said folk need to be helped. You cannot be silent while other people are being targeted. When you have the Fearless Fund being targeted because they're trying to create venture capital opportunities for black women, and Ed Bloom is suing them as we speak by saying this is unfair when we already know what the numbers look like. Now is the moment for white folk in America, white folk in Tennessee, white folk in Knoxville to realize that you have benefited greatly from the works of others. Do understand that poor whites in America, their standard of living increased after the Civil War because they partnered with freed slaves. After the Civil War in this state, in South Carolina and North Carolina, they realized that. In fact, you can go check the numbers. Every time there's been a movement led by black people fighting for rights, the quality of life of poor white folks increased because guess what? When you broke, you broke. You can be black and broke. You can be white and broke. The one thing y'all got in common, both of y'all are broke as hell. And so what is needed are for people today to be willing to get out of their comfort zone and challenge power. If you respect and love and revere Dr. King, then act like it. Be a modern day acolyte. And do understand, it's going to be a battle. It's going to be tough. You might lose some friends. You might lose some folks who say, why are you doing that? Why are you fighting on behalf of them? If you are willing to say you love King and you love Hosea and you love Andrew and you love Jim Lawson and you love all the folks, the foot soldiers in Selma, the children in Birmingham, if you want to say you love what they did, well then do what they did, because 50 years from now we should not still be talking about what they did. We should be talking about what you did in Tennessee, in Knoxville in 2024. Now is the moment for every single one of you to get in this battle, to get in this fight, to figure out where your place is. And as my frat brother Burton Woodson Tandy said, we will fight until hell freezes over, and we will fight on the ice.
Some of y'all standing because you're uncomfortable. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope that you all enjoyed and took several, I know I said take a nugget or two, but it's more like a nugget or 10 or 20 from the good Roland Martin. We thank you so much for giving us your time and your thoughts. Now, you all have had the most graciousness here. I know everybody's like, I just want to eat a little bit of my salad. I'm a little hungry. We are going to go ahead and have our lunch. We're also going to be so fortunate to have entertainment during our lunchtime, and I believe that is Mr. Brian Clay. Oh, there you, I was looking for you. There you go. My brother, Brian Clay, always talented. He will be giving us, sharing his talent with us throughout this portion. Again, ladies and gentlemen, Roland Martin.
Just tell him I'm gonna take pictures.
Okay, Roland said if you do want to take photos, he will be over here to the side
till 1:30.
Till 1:30, and then we've got to get him on a plane.
Brother Martin, we want to give you this certificate